Hello, and welcome to episode 10 of Think Big with Michael Zellner. All positive, no politics. My guest today is Dr. David Wootton. Dr. Wootton is the owner of the Wootton Clinic in Cordova, Tennessee, and he has been practicing chiropractic since 1983, almost 40 years. And he is also the first doctor in the United States to purchase a spinal decompression table. Welcome to the show, Dr. Wootton.
Thank you, Mike. Good to be here.
Thank you very much. So tell us something interesting about yourself that most people don't know.
Well, I had, as you mentioned already, the first decompression table in the country, but in the middle of all my treating patients, I actually had a brief country music career and sang country music, did a little touring, and had a lot of fun with it.
Oh, wow. What was that like?
It was a joy. I got to travel with the Tennessee Three, which is Johnny Cash's band. We did some shows in New York, did a lot with my band. I don't know if some of your viewers might know some of the local artists that I played with. I'm trying to think of one of them is a guitar player that plays just regularly. It's been a while. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's been about a decade since we sang together. But, just lots of fun. We did some Johnny Cash benefits for them. We kind of got tied in with them a little bit and did some fun stuff. I don't sound a lot like Johnny Cash, but I had my own unique sound. But we just had a great time. Great time with that.
That's awesome. So what do you believe is something that is a misconception that people have about seeing a chiropractor?
We watch movies all the time and you hear, and frankly on YouTube, it's a lot of crunching and twisting and popping and cracking. And we don't do that so much. There's so many chiropractors that don't. And that's probably a big misconception of what patients get when they come to my office. Of course, spinal decompression is one of our mainstays that we do. Our goal is to help those people in the middle between lower back pain that they go to see a chiropractor for, generally speaking, and the surgeon, where it's very, very severe conditions with numbness down the leg and sciatica and so on. And we're kind of that little go-between, the more serious cases than the average chiropractor, but our goal is to try to keep them off an operating table.
You went to Palmer College of Chiropractic in Iowa, and there was a doctor there, Dr. Walter Vernon Pierce, that had a significant impact on your life and your future career. What did he do for you?
He was a doctor that was very intent on developing a better way to do chiropractic care. Like we talked about a second ago, chiropractic is not twisting and popping in the spine. He developed a technique of adjusting the spine that involves no twisting, no popping in the spine. It uses drop pieces on the table, and the results are just incredible. And when I was in school as a student trying to soak everything in, he came to visit the school there, and actually as a service to future students, did a very low-cost seminar teaching his technique and the philosophy of chiropractic. And he had an ego that was 10 times as big as his profile. And so many students got turned off by just how arrogant he was. And I don't mean that in a bad way. He just loved life and was very big. And I saw through that whole ego that people got so turned off with, to see the actual meat and potatoes of what he had to share. And the results were just incredible. And patients come to my office every week that have been to other chiropractors and it just didn't help them, or it even got a little bit worse. And we use this technique with them and it's like a miracle. The results are just incredible. And that in conjunction with the spinal decompression I do has been just an incredible union of two fantastic techniques that has saved people that even surprises me. Wow. From an operating table.
You've treated many famous people during your career, Bette Midler, Robert Plant, the Backstreet Boys, the Eagles, and, athletes from NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball. What has that experience been like for you?
Well, I don't talk about that a lot because I don't want people to think that that is the pinnacle of my life is treating these celebrities, because my pinnacle is helping the everyday person,
Sure.
the guy that's out there breaking his back, moving Kellogg's cereal boxes across the floor, moving FedEx packages, UPS drivers that are carrying boxes in and out of businesses all day long. That's really where my joy comes from, is helping those folks. I guess you could just say that treating those celebrities was kind of icing on the cake. For whatever reason, I got tapped. Uh, uh, when people would come to town, they'd say, "Hey, I need a chiropractor," and they would call me and ask me to come out and treat them, and got to meet a lot of unique personalities. So, as you mentioned, Bette Midler, she was in quite a bit of pain, and we had the great fortune of working with her before she went on stage. And I didn't stay for her show, but I heard that she went out and was dancing all over the floor, and just really couldn't tell her back was a problem at all. Got a chance to treat a couple of the Eagles band, Joe Walsh and Glenn Fry, before he passed away. And that was a unique experience. Joe Walsh is a character. Glenn Fry was as nice as he could be, and I can't say enough good about him. The whole band was great.
Right.
But Joe Walsh had me adjusting before they went out on stage, and he said, "Man, you got to hang out with us." I said, "Well, I got a backstage pass. I'll hang out on the side of the stage over here and listen." And of course, I grew up in the 70s, and that's all you could hear.
Right.
Every other song was the Eagles band, and so it was a real treat for me to sit there and listen to hit after hit after hit of them playing their songs. But Joe Walsh said, "Hey, you gonna be here at intermission? I want you to adjust me again." That was great, and so I said, "Sure." So I adjusted him at intermission and adjusted him. When I got done adjusting him, he said, "Hey, is there any way you can come to my penthouse at the Peabody tomorrow morning before we leave town and adjust me again?" And he was quite the fanatic for getting care done with his spine. So I got to adjust him several times, but got to adjust Robert Plant. And the joke behind that is my parents were, we were conservative Christians growing up, and wasn't allowed to go to rock concerts. And when they called me up to ask if I'd come treat Robert Plant, I said, "Who?" They said, "Robert Plant." I said, "Well, who's Robert Plant?" Dumb me. But they said, Led Zeppelin. I said, "Oh, okay, yeah." So anyway, it's been a real joy. That's just kind of icing on the cake.
Sure.
But, like I said, the main thing I live for is going in and helping the everyday person that's suffering. And frankly, so many of the people that I treat feel like there's no other solution. They've tried everything. They've tried nerve blocks. They've tried muscle relaxers and pain pills. They've tried physical therapy. They've tried chiropractic, and it just doesn't seem like there's any answer for their pain. And we get a chance to treat them and see some really great things happen.
There's so many heartfelt testimonials online that talk about how your staff is so friendly. They treat patients like their family. They say you guys really, truly care, and you have a really positive attitude. And, unfortunately, there are many doctors today that don't have a great bedside manner. Their goal is just to see as many people as possible each day without spending much time with, a patient. How has what your staff has done, how has it made a difference at your clinic?
Well, I have to work with these people all day long. So I try to hire people that I want to work with and live with on a daily basis. So that's a big part of it. But, when I first got into practice, a couple years into it, I had to go to a medical doctor for a particular procedure. And I told them when I made the appointment, I said, "Hey, I've got patients myself later today. Is there any way I can get your very first appointment this morning at 8 o'clock?" And they said, "Yeah, we'll put you down for 8 o'clock first thing." And I would imagine it was probably 10 o'clock or after before they finally brought me back into an exam room. And once I got back to the exam room, I waited there for probably another hour. And I just happened to look out the open door of my exam room and saw the doctor walk in with his golf clubs into the back of his office and get ready to start seeing patients. And that just made a real impression on me that if I'm going to treat people, I need to treat every person like it's me or my brother or my mother. And if we make their appointment at 8 o'clock, we're going to see them at 8 o'clock or very shortly thereafter, because their time is just as valuable as mine.
That's awesome. A little over 4 years ago, you received a master certificate in non-surgical spinal decompression, and a lot of doctors either They recommend or strongly advise their patients who are having major back pain to have surgery, which, usually includes, downtime and can be really expensive. What does non-surgical spinal decompression do for your patients?
Well, as you mentioned, it's non-surgical, and that's probably the biggest thing. I have never in my life been on an operating table, and I hope I never am. Um, and most doctors that are sincere or honest will tell you that there are risks just with anesthesia alone.
Right.
And uh, the more risks that we can avoid for a patient and still get results, the better. And for surgeons, I love surgeons. They're great. They probably don't like me so much because I've kept so many people off of their operating tables, but they're needed and necessary. And I wish I could say I got 100% of my patients well. I don't. But we have a very high success rate, probably 80% or better, that we're able to improve greatly or resolve their problem. But, it's like a carpenter. Every solution is done with a hammer, and with a plumber, everything can be fixed with a pipe wrench. And with surgeons, everything is fixed only with surgery. And so, I don't fault them for that. That's just what they learn. That's just what they do. I will say this, it's been impressive to me how chiropractic has changed over the 40 years I've been in practice. When I first got in practice, I was hearing stories of the previous decade or two where chiropractors were called quacks and basically belittled and told they weren't true science. And today I have surgeons coming to my office wanting referrals for the cases that I don't get well, because they know we have a high volume of people that are potential surgical cases. And if I just can't get them well, then we have to send them somewhere to get resolved.
Right.
And so my son was in practice with me for about 6 years, and we loved it. And he was in my office one day and knocked on the door, and it was kind of unusual because when I'm treating a patient, I typically don't get interrupted, and answered the door, and he said, Dad, there's a doctor out here who wants to meet you. And so I said, well, I'll be out there as soon as I can done with the patient. So I finished up with the patient, came out, and one of the top surgeons here in town had come to my office and wanted to meet me because he'd been hearing so many good things about spinal decompression. And we had some mutual patients that he thought was definitely surgical, and somehow or another on their next follow-up visit, they were just dramatically better. And he just wanted to find out what we're doing and so on. But ultimately, he did say, well, if you have any cases that you can't help, send them my way, and we'd be glad to help you out. And finished up with him, and my son was very nonchalant, walked about doing his stuff. And I said, son, do you realize how amazing that is now? Because when I first got in practice, they wouldn't darken your door. And here now, 40 years later, chiropractic has now reached a level where it's viewed very respectfully in the medical and healthcare community.
What is the Wootton system?
The Wootton system is that combination of the Pierce technique along with spinal decompression. To my knowledge, there's nobody else in the entire world that is using that particular combination. I was the very first doctor, as we mentioned, to have decompression. That was just me in the entire United States.
Wow.
And it grew very, very rapidly because of the results. And of course, now there's thousands of doctors across the country that are doing spinal decompression. But I don't know of anybody that's doing the Pierce technique along with the decompression. There's two components to most disc cases. One is what originally caused the disc to mess up in the first place, and that is usually a pelvic misalignment that we all develop in time as we bend, lift, and do the things that we do in life. That pelvic misalignment increases the pressure on the disc, and over 20, 30 years, that disc eventually wears out and herniates. And so we not only pulled the disc back in, but with the decompression table, but with the Pierce technique, we correct the pelvis that originally caused it. So now once we can get the disc back in off that nerve, now it wants to stay there and heal rather than reoccur.
A chiropractor treats many different things, from arthritis to back pain, frequent headaches, neck pain, stiff muscles, and a lot more. However, most people don't realize a good chiropractor also can help someone who has a weak immune system and deal with stress and anxiety. Why don't more people know about that and see a chiropractor to help with that?
Probably the biggest reason is there's not been any dramatic research on that. And most chiropractors that I know don't go out and advertise, hey, come see me, we get rid of ear infections. You don't see that in the newspaper, you don't see it on TV. Come see me, we help you with depression. But just because there's not a whole lot of research yet to be done in that area, because there's so much that needs to be done in the area of just simply back pain, neck pain issues. Um, uh, I'll talk to patients one-on-one about those type of conditions. I don't typically market or talk about that, but the fact is when you put pressure on the spinal cord, when you increase pressure on the brain stem, it can affect anything in your entire body. And I mentioned ear infections. And again, I don't advertise this or promote it, but I can't tell you the number of patients that have come in and just by on casual conversation and mentioned about their child who's getting ready to have their second or third um, surgery to put tubes in the ears. And I'll say, hey, let's take a look at them and we'll adjust them one time. It's usually not very difficult at all. One adjustment on the upper cervical area, which is where the nerves are that go to the inner ear, and no surgery was needed, and they had no ear infections to speak of after that. So,
That's great.
chiropractic, yeah, the brain controls the entire body, and everything functions. If you wiggle your little toe, your brain had to send a message down your spinal cord to that little toe to make it move. And anytime you put pressure anywhere along that pathway, especially the spine, you can alter those messages and have what we call dis-ease or disease.
Another thing that people don't associate a chiropractor with as much is someone, who has TMJ. My mother has had it for many years. And it's very painful sometimes. And, tell the viewers how someone, who has TMJ can get help with that.
Well, any joint can misalign or lock up. And, I have patients, again, it's not a big part of my practice because we are a disc, back pain,
Sure.
neck pain clinic, but I can't tell how many shoulders that I have adjusted, how many knees I've adjusted. So the TMJ is on what's called a ginglymus joint, which is a hinge joint, and your mandible rotates on that joint. And if you bite down on something or get hit in the side of the jaw or whatever, you can actually misalign that joint. And if it's misaligned and not resolved, it'll actually begin to reshape the cartilage in that joint, and you can develop some significant TMJ issues. And so what we do in chiropractic is we try to assess which way the mandible is misaligned on which joint, and we just simply make an adjustment to begin to move that back. Sometimes it takes multiple adjustments to get the mandible to get back and stay. And again, it's not 100% of the time we can resolve it, but the vast majority of the time it can be resolved.
As we talked about earlier about, that you've worked with, many athletes, for in the 40 years you've been in practice, how important is it for an athlete or anyone who works out to warm up before a workout and then to cool down afterwards to prevent an injury?
Oh yeah, there's new studies that are coming out that saying actually stretching before can decrease your potential. So I do tell patients to warm up before their athlete, and that might be simply walking, jogging, get the heart rate up, get the blood circulating. But then after you're done with your performance, that's really what I'm seeing as the most important time to stretch. And what that does, it keeps adhesions and muscle spasms, lactic acid from building up, and so on. So definitely warm up before you do your sports event, but stretching is more important to me after the event's over.
It goes beyond just the physical wellness for chiropractors and includes emotional wellness too. How do you help with that part?
Well, somebody once correlated, it was actually my brother, who's also a chiropractor in Ohio, went to a seminar, and it was on the neurological responses to an adjustment. And the response is what the instructor said, that basically you could, to help you understand the concept, when you adjust the upper cervical area, that's where your brain stem is. That's where the brain passes down becomes the spinal cord and the spinal column. And when you make adjustments there and release pressure off that, it's almost like rebooting your computer. So if your computer's getting bogged down with a bunch of data and information, when you reboot that computer, it cleans it all up, and now you start over afresh again with a pathway that's clear. And it's the same thing. If you are getting bogged down, stress, and we all have stress in life, but if you get bogged down by pressure on the brainstem and so on, when you make that adjustment and reboot it, not all of a sudden do you feel a whole lot better. Not only does the body function better, but it also tends to give you a more positive attitude, and you just, because you're feeling a whole lot better, number one. I have patients that say to me all the time, doctor, after that adjustment, I didn't realize how cloudy my thinking had gotten. When you made that adjustment, it's like, man, my thoughts just cleared up. I was able to do things again and had a much clearer focus and able to concentrate better and so on. So pressure on the nervous system is not a good thing. And chiropractors make it a life calling to free up pressure on the nervous system.
Over the last 16 months or so, I've been heavily into working out. I've experienced some joint pain. It's a lot less now that I've lost a lot of weight, but it's still there. And, obviously joint pain is a big problem today. And, some people aren't fully aware that a lot of different foods cause joint pain. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, what goes in your body is what the fuel that your body is going to use to function on. And carbohydrates are probably the worst. When you have a high intake of carbohydrates, not only is that not good for your system, it also makes your body more acidic, and all that leads to inflammation. So the fuel that you put in your mouth is incredibly important as far as how you feel in life and how your body functions. So, I make it a point to try to keep my carbohydrates at a low level. I think it was Linus Pauling, or no, I'm sorry, it was Dr. Atkins that spearheaded the low carb movement.
Right.
And if you've ever done keto or low carb, you know how much better your joints feel. You know how much weight you lose. You just know how good that is for your health. So carbohydrates is probably the biggest offender.
So many people suffer from severe headaches. They don't know that by changing, some of their habits that they have that could eliminate those headaches. How can a chiropractor help with that?
Well, you get back to the pressure on the nerves. And so we all have certain stress levels. Our body can handle that stress just fine. But when we reach a certain point, a tipping point, where that stress gets above what we're able to handle, our muscles start to tighten up. We oftentimes feel that in our neck area and shoulder area. I don't know if you've had a stressful day, you feel your shoulders are drawn up, etc.
Right.
And there comes a tipping point where you actually begin to trigger things in your body, a physical muscular response. Muscles spasm up, and when the muscles spasm up, it impedes proper oxygen or blood flow. And when you impede the blood flow, you impede the oxygen of the brain, etc. And when you diminish the oxygen of the brain, you get a headache. And so what we try to do, we can't eliminate stress in somebody's body, but if we can take pressure off the nervous system, well, that might elevate that point of where the body triggers a physiological response. And so the other thing that causes headaches is just flat out pressure on the nerve. You pinch a nerve. If you pinch a nerve to your leg, it's going to go numb, or you're going to get sciatica down that leg. If you pinch a nerve that goes back up into the cerebellum, the brain or the head, you're going to very likely trigger symptoms back into the head, which is typically headaches. I see one of the things I see consistently with headache conditions is a loss of curve in the cervical spine. When we look at our spine from the side, it has three normal curves. Number one, the curve of the neck goes forward, the curve in the middle back goes backwards, and the curve in the lower back goes forward again. And when you lose that curve in the neck, which is so common with my new patients that walk in the door with neck or headache issues, when we start treating the spine with the pierce technique, which is a very specific adjustment. It's not a lot of twisting and popping. It's one vertebra that we adjust to begin to change the biomechanics back towards normal, get that curve to redevelop back in the neck, the headaches go away.
You mentioned your son, Jared, and obviously he followed in your footsteps, and now he has his own, chiropractor business. And I know that you obviously must be really proud of him, just as you followed in your father's footstep, JR. And, he was a chiropractor, I believe, in Ohio. I know he obviously must have been very proud of you to do that. My dad was a podiatrist for over 40 years here in Memphis. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, he
Wow.
loved his patients, spent a ton of time with them, and they loved him too. And I believe you said about your father, I remember walking down the street with Dad, and people coming up to him and thanking him because they weren't hurting anymore after he treated him. And you said that you thought it was pretty cool and neat that he helped so many people. How much did your dad impact your life?
Well, he's the reason I do what I do. When I was in college, I really had not taken it seriously when I got there. And at the end of my freshman year, I went in to register for my sophomore year, and the supervisor said, "What courses are you going to take?" Well, I said, "Well, I'm not sure. What am I supposed to take?" And they said, "Well, what is your major going to be? What do you want to do for a career?" And it just hit me between the eyes that it's time for me to grow up and decide what I'm going to be doing for my life. And I played baseball through high school, lettered and all that stuff. And I was playing football in college and trying to play baseball as well, two sports. And I didn't know if I wanted to try to become a baseball player or if I wanted to sing for a career. I loved flying a plane, the thought of flying a jet. And so I didn't know if I wanted to be an airline pilot or chiropractor was one of the call-ins as well that I could potentially walk into. And it was a very big wake-up call for me. And my dad always said that, Dave, if you ever need direction for something big in your life, to fast and pray about it. And so I spent the next several days fasting and praying. For those who may not know what fasting is, I just eliminated all food altogether, drank water, and didn't let people know I was doing it. That's not the whole purpose.
Sure.
Continued on with the normal functions that I was doing at college so that people wouldn't know I was fasting, which meant playing intramural basketball and everything else. And I lost 15 pounds over the course of 3 days.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was pretty dramatic. And every night I would go up into the chapel of our dorm and pray and ask God. I sincerely wanted God to tell me verbally or drop a piece of paper out of the ceiling and tell me what are you supposed to do for a career. And after 3 days of that, I just felt like I'd touched the heart of God. And so I ended my fast at that point, and doors just seemed to open up for me to be a chiropractor. And I can't minimize the impact that my father had as far as him being a chiropractor as well. But there was definitely an answer that came from that point, and I knew at that point that that's what God wanted me to do, to try to help people get out of pain. And so that's how it happened.
What are the most important lessons that you've learned in life?
One of the biggest joys of my life is having the kids that we have. My wife and I just celebrated our 41st wedding anniversary. Of course, just so that thank you, so that your viewers know, I got married at 7. So, but I had to learn how to be a good husband. But having kids has been being responsible, being somebody that they could look up to, somebody that they could pattern their life out of. That was one of the biggest lessons I learned. I had to grow up and be the person that if I wanted them to be a certain thing, I had to be that person, because kids look up to their parents. That's just all there is to it. So I guess being an example for my kids is one of the biggest things that I've had to learn through life. And God's blessed us now. We have 9 grandkids as well. And I feel very fortunate.
That's awesome. So, Doc, if someone wants to come see you, how can they get a hold of you and find your clinic?
We just recently moved. For years, I was over on Wolf River Boulevard in Germantown. We have now moved, and we're in Cordova. We needed a bigger space, and we're doing a lot of workman's comp for the federal government as well. I have other doctors that I've hired for that. And so we're on Bonnie Lane now in Cordova, and they can call the office. That's the simplest way to say it. So, they can Google our number. We're easy to find. And if they decide to do that, it's a pretty simple process. They come in, we don't do anything. It's nothing's painful. I just sit down and find out a little bit about their history. Where do you hurt? Why do you hurt? Why do you think you've hurt? Have you had injuries? How long have you been hurting? and how bad does it hurt? And then I sit down and try to give them solutions. If I can't help them, then I tell them where they can go to try to get some relief. You know, I've been around a long time, and I know a lot of doctors in town. So, I mean, even this past week, I've sent 1 or 2 people to a different doctor just because I didn't feel like I was the best solution for them. So, it's a pretty simple process, pretty painless process, and we do our very best to try to help our patients.
That's awesome. Well, Doc, I really appreciate you coming on today. I've enjoyed talking to you and listening to stories and stuff. And I learned a lot of things that I didn't know. So that's been very informative. So thank you so very much.
It's been my pleasure, Mike. And by the way, my wife and I have thoroughly enjoyed the mattress that we got at
Awesome.
Sleepy Z's. It has been the best mattress that we've had. So
awesome. I love hearing stories like that. I still hear them. So that it makes me feel really good.
Yep. Very good.
Awesome. Thank you again so much.
You bet, Mike. My pleasure. Thanks for asking me to be on your show.
My pleasure too.